trying to get the most out of me. And that's what a good partner does. They're trying to help you grow. They're trying to help you elevate yourself. They're trying to push it to the next level. That's what keeps the relationship growing, nourished, and moving forward. Sometimes we become so stagnant in our relationships. I know because I've been there. And that's only because of what we're doing and what we're not doing. If you're not wanting to build that deeper connection and be authentic with your wife or your friends or whatever, that relationship will fizzle. It's not gonna, you can't maintain it. You can only go for so long. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Roundtable. Thanks for joining us today. We're here with Dustin again for another wonderful episode 3.
How's it going, guys?
And we know today we're going to be talking about vulnerability, so it's going to be another great topic, man. I think it's something that, obviously, we are trying to grow in as well. We're trying to be better, being vulnerable, with friendships, with, just, our relationships with our families and just our day-to-day life. And I think we're going to be talking about some of the struggles, some of the way that this is introduced into your personal life, and just how we were able to overcome some of those barriers that we've seen while being vulnerable. And hopefully, the viewers can get a little bit out of it and, work on being vulnerable, because I think it's important in today's society to build better relationships with people. And man, I'm excited to hit on this topic, brother. How are you?
I'm doing good. How about you?
Oh man, it's amazing, dude. We had a great weekend. You had your baby's birthday parties,
yes,
which was amazing. I wasn't able to make it, but I love those little girls. Just they're such a bundle of joy, man. Seriously,
you don't realize how hard parties are or how much effort parents put in until you have to do it. And I didn't even put a lot in, but being the pack mule, even that, you're like, man, this is a lot of work.
This is tough. This is not easy. This isn't I know, man. You definitely gain another appreciation for parents when, I honestly, I didn't grow up with a lot of parties, so, I think my mom got saved out of that one. But growing up, man, I mean, watching my girl grow up and doing parties for her, it's a lot of freaking. Luckily, Tay loves that type of stuff, so she takes control, but
it's still a lot.
I don't, God bless all the parents, man, that are doing it, because it's tough.
It's a lot, guys. We understand.
So, but yeah, man, great weekend. Glad to have you here, man. So let's jump into the topic, dude. Vulnerability.
This is a big one, guys. It might not be a super long episode, but this is a big one.
Right. And so yeah, man, vulnerability. I guess I could start us off, man. I mean, and what does it mean? I guess to me, and vulnerability to me means just one being able to be comfortable in your own skin, being okay with seeming weak at points to you. That's really what vulnerability meant to me for a long time. It's like being able to just show a little bit of weakness to say, okay, maybe I'm not so strong in this area. And even the weakness wasn't really a weakness to me. It was actually bettering my relationships with, let's just put it, my wife's perspective. But that was what it was to me, man. What about you, brother?
To me, I always looked at, we grow up in the society that if you're vulnerable, you're weak. And so that's what it always was to me, was you were weak. But the truth is the complete opposite, in my opinion, that when you're vulnerable, you're actually one of the strongest ones, because you're willing to get out there, whether it's this. I mean, we're being vulnerable with our viewers, or vulnerable with our wives. We're out there doing the hard, in my opinion, one of the hardest things, being open and honest and showing that weakness, that, hey, we might not be the best in this, but we're going to be honest that we're having the struggle and that we want to grow in it.
Right. So, I love that, man. Well, can you connect, I guess, something that you've been, how being vulnerable helps build that connection with somebody? I mean, you can use it as a friend, or let's just put it in your wife's perspective, because they're the ones we spend the most time with, right?
Right.
And I know that we've both been working on being a little bit more vulnerable with our spouses. So can you explain the importance to you and how that played a role in your relationship of opening that vulnerability?
So we'll go deeper into this in another episode. But when I was finally to the point that I needed to be vulnerable and honest was at my lowest in depression, like suicidal thoughts, everything. And when I was finally vulnerable enough to say, hey, this is where I'm at and I need help, was the time that she's like, okay, get the help you need. We'll deal with whatever we need to, but let's get the help. Now that you're honest with me, I know where you're at least I can adjust to help you versus just sitting on the sideline saying, whatever, I don't really care. But being the more vulnerable and open I am, the more of a connection we can make because I'm being honest with her. I'm not lying to her. I'm not lying to myself. Not that I've ever really lied to her, but you're just being honest. Your communication starts opening up because you guys start understanding, at least from my perspective, you start understanding each other more, and you have more of that. Okay, you need to speak your truth. I'm going to speak mine type of situation. What about you?
Man, for me, it's about the same thing, right? I think the especially the weakness part that we kind of opened the episode with, it's the same thing. I don't really tell a lot of lies, but for the most part, the biggest change in our relationship was being able to be vulnerable. But to me, what I ended up finding out was vulnerability was just, really, like you said, being honest with myself. We hit on this last week, accountability for kind of what's happening in the relationship or in the situation. So, I agree, man. I think, for us, it was, in our relationship, when things kind of got rough, when, we were really in a bad spot, I was drinking a lot more and, really starting to spiral. It was one of those things where, the more I can communicate to her, like what I actually felt, the emotions, even if in my head I thought I was being weak, at least I was building an actually deeper connection with her because she was like, okay, he's not just like this stone cold type of dude, like doesn't have any emotions. She's actually able to relate, like, okay, he understands what's happening. He understands me. It was better to build that relationship in a deeper sense because we could actually, like, it just goes back to, we can build an actual deeper relationship together. It's not like one way or the other, because I feel like sometimes when you're in a relationship, especially as a man, we're like, okay, we got to be the ones that are, and you do have to be level headed, don't get me wrong, but it is important to have that sense in that relationship, because then it's just one-sided. You'll always be the one absorbing things, and sometimes your wife wants to help you. Like, it's not just us wanting to help the wives want to help us too sometimes. So
one thing that I've noticed personally about being more open and honest and vulnerable with my spouse is that you start looking at, you look at life a little bit differently and you start thinking, how many other couples are living on the surface?
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's extremes in every relationship, don't get me wrong, but would you agree that there's more surface relationships out there than not? You have so many women or men that are so insecure or weak or feel weak for whatever reason, but if they were just vulnerable and honest with their spouse and just said, hey, this is where I'm at, this is how I'm feeling, like in any situation, opening that communication and being vulnerable during it is going to make, you're going to take that surface away.
100%. I think, to hit on your question, yeah, I think a lot of relationships are on surface level, which is, I feel like there's so many issues because you don't ever get to the stuff that needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
Right. I think so many, and it goes back to men's pride, right? Kind of the ego kind of, and I can speak on this because, mine was inflated for a very long time. You feel like you just, you don't really build an actual relationship that has a great foundation if you're just dealing from the surface level. Like, you're never going to actually build something that's going to, maybe you might be able to hold it for a while, but I promise you at some point, you'll just wake up one day and you'll be like, oh, we're getting a divorce? Well, why are we getting it? Oh, like, well, dude, you didn't, well, I never saw this coming. Well, the signs were all there. You just weren't aware. You weren't digging deep enough with each other to figure out, hey, something's wrong. Something's not working. We're not connecting the same way that we were when we first in the honeymoon phase, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, a lot of relationships, I think, I can't judge everybody. I can't, everybody kind of has their own growth. But I think for myself, like, yeah, for a long time, a lot of my relationships, before I got married, were a lot of surface level things, you know what I mean? But definitely when I wanted to dig deeper with, Tay Tay, yeah, it was super surface level for a very long time. But that's just, I think men like that too, because we banter, we kind of talk, it goes back to the men's ego type of thing. Like, oh, we don't, it's not normal just to call your friend and be like, hey, what's up, brother? What you doing, man? Oh, nothing, just hanging out, dude. We don't really do a lot of that. Women really do, they'll call you, but hey, babe, what are you doing? Oh, nothing, just chilling, But if you ask them, what are you doing? Oh, I'm doing it, because they're being vulnerable about what they're feeling, what they've done, and we're just kind of like, yeah, it was cool, it was a good day, whatever. And so I've seen that aspect. You have to work on that. Sometimes it's not. You can't just be like, that was good.
I was gonna say there's a lot of times, and as a man, I can't speak as much for the women on this part, but they're like you said, you call up a buddy and you're like, hey, what are you doing? Oh, nothing. Da 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 da. Or you're talking to them and they're struggling. You can see they're struggling. Maybe they've hinted to it here or there, but you ask them, and for the most part, they're not honest about it.
No.
I mean, even as somebody that is struggling a lot, there's only a handful of people that know the whole story, and eventually, the viewers will know a lot or all of it.
Yeah.
And that's the goal of this, is to be vulnerable with them and with you, and with, let you guys know that this is a way you can live this way and still be a strong person. I mean, like I said, I have a few people that I talk to that the more we talk and the more we communicate, the more vulnerable they're becoming. But at the same time, at a certain point, I've got to be also equally as vulnerable for them, so that they feel like it's not a one-sided relationship. But, you start talking to that guy, and we start talking to him. They're like, yeah, we're good. Yeah, I'm good. You hear about women going, and they tend to talk deeper, it seems like. They're like, oh, yeah, it was a good conversation. I mean,
right.
Whatever. My wife does lashes, and a lot of the time she's like, yeah, we had a really good conversation, or, it was really good. We had a deep, meaningful conversation. And, some of these girls, granted, she's had them as clients for a while. Some of them are pretty instant, like, let's go, like, open up and are open and honest with her. That's not going to happen with a guy. That's why you don't see a lot of guys in therapy either. Let's just be real.
And I think that's kind of what we want to, show people, that it's you don't have to do it alone. Like,
No.
you can have brothers around you that you can reach out to, and have non-judgmental brothers to just say, hey, dude, like, let me know. Because thank God, I mean, there's only one person that I've ever been around that's committed, unalive themselves, kind of just, I don't even know if we could say the word, but that have been, committed a suicide or whatever, But yeah, man, I think, so I haven't been around a lot of that, to be honest. But and I'm glad for that. I'm very grateful that. But I just wanted people to know, especially people that are around me, to just, if we can break that barrier, and being able to, like, that fear of, like, being judged by your friends or whatever, and you can help that person, like, move forward, get another day, or get it, or save. You've heard stories about that stuff. Like, I reached out to them and changed my life. And maybe it doesn't, but at least to know that you have somebody in your corner that you can reach up to and say, hey, man, like, I'm having a rough day, dude. Like, it doesn't necessarily need to be all the way to the other side, but even if you're having a rough day, just have somebody you can call and just say, hey, man, today sucked, dude. I've been getting my ass kicked all day, and just have somebody that's willing to listen and say, like, yeah, you got this, bro. Like, just keep moving forward. Life's whatever. Give you some encouragement in that moment, because you were able to be vulnerable with them. And then we don't do that enough, but
No.
I agree. Women do that. I mean, because they have that more, feminine energy, right? They can, they that way that they communicate with each other is a lot more deeper,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's why we're two different people, right? Men and women are two different people, and but I think that's why we get these relationships sometimes, because somebody other than yourself can offer you something that you don't have. I'm not saying all men are not vulnerable. There's a lot of men, I'm sure, that are vulnerable as well, but it's like gathering that like information and how they function through it. And so luckily, same thing, my wife's super vulnerable. It sounds like, obviously your wife being
Oh,
in that service, in that field, also amplifies that as well, because yeah, people feel comfortable. You're there for an X amount of time, and you just start chit chatting, and the next thing you're talking about something that I've had great conversations with my barbers. It's just like, why the heck did we, why did I even go into that? Well, it was just organic. You know what I mean? And
Yeah, those are the good conversations that you want to have, and those are when we start getting bigger, and when we start, because we do want to start a men's group at some point,
right,
and bring wives, couples if they're involved, to at least know what's going on. But that's a big thing, is like, get these guys to give them somebody to talk to if they need to. Whether it's us or whether it's other guys in the group. Maybe they connect more with, Billy down the street than they do with me. That's fine.
Billy's awesome, dude.
But as long as long as you have somebody, and that's going to be the biggest thing, is having somebody. I know, not only do I have you, if I was really, if I needed to, I could call you, no judgment.
Always.
I got my best friend of, I don't even know how many years. Me and him talk a couple times a week. I don't see him often, but we talk. And there's a lot of times that I know he's just needed me to talk to him. Right. And sometimes I've given him a scenario that he didn't quite realize, or talk to him about something. And then at the end of the conversation, he's like, man, I didn't think about it that way. You have a really, really good perspective. So having somebody that's on the outside is sometimes really nice. Even though I don't know all the information, sometimes that's better, because I can assume a little bit of it. Not that that's the greatest thing to ever do, but I can assume a little bit, and I can take the pieces and I can see it from a different eyes. And he's vulnerable enough. And same thing, when I was struggling, he was there for me. I was vulnerable with him, was honest with him. And that's one thing I think everybody needs more than anything.
We do. We do need that, I didn't grow up with brothers or anything like that. So, but I can only imagine that relationship that you can have with somebody that you can count on, you know what I mean? And I'm sure there's issues with some brothers out there, but I'm just saying, like, a good, healthy brother relationship where, when you're walking down the street, like, home, he's got my back, I got his back. I can call him in the middle of the night and say, hey, dude, whatever. So I love that, man. Thanks, Andy. I think, we should all have those people around us, and definitely with the group that we want to build, it's somewhere where we can have that literal brotherhood, where we can just know that you're in a safe space. It's not this mopey thing. It's more of just communicating with each other and having honest conversations. If you see, I think it's important to have people around you too that, when you're vulnerable and you're like, oh yeah, man, I didn't do what I needed to do this weekend. I didn't go to the gym for a week. And your brother says, dude, you better go. You got to go, man. Like, get back onto it. A week's enough. Let's go. You know what I mean? And so that's what we hope to get out of it, dude. So, go ahead.
I was going to say, a lot of our accountability and vulnerability go pretty hand in hand in a lot of ways. 'Cause, breaking down the barriers kind of, at least for me, when you start breaking down the barriers of being vulnerable, you have to hold yourself accountable,
right,
for your actions, but breaking down the barrier, like, what do you think was the hardest part of that?
I mean, the barriers it depends on which barrier you want, right?
Let's go with between you and the wife.
So for me, with my wife and I, and the barrier for me was one that was, fear of being judged. That was the biggest fear, right? I was afraid to be seen as weak and then being judged by my wife. And so how I was able to kind of overcome that, it was just kind of getting outside of my own head, when you seek different perspectives. So, for a long time, like I said, I kind of started spiraling and wasn't really able to communicate. Vulnerability wasn't something that came natural to me. It wasn't something that, I really cared to really even dive into. But when we started building our relationship and started kind of really working on it, really trying to take it to the next level, a lot deeper and understanding of what she's going through, what I'm going through. One of the things that my wife told me was, she told me straight up, she's like, she hit on it exactly how you said it. Like, we're living a surface level relationship. We're never going to be able to really build something, a great foundation, if we're just living on the surface. Like, that's literally what she told me. And so I was like, okay, so what do you need from me? Well, I need you to be, more honest. I need you to tell me something more than just I'm okay, like, or I had a bad day, but don't worry about it. And so for me, it was literally, this is how I work. Not everybody works the same way, but just tell me, give it to me straight. What do you need? And I will work on it. And so that's really what it was. And for me, it was just, like I said, it was the fear of being judged by her, like being seen as weak. And then, I always had this thought of like, well, some other dude's going to come up. He's got all his shit together. He's a tough, in shape man. He's going to, isn't vulnerable. He's going to come in and swoop her off her feet. But then you start thinking of these things. Well, if that's the case, you just prepared yourself for something greater later. Right. So I just started really looking at it that way. And I was just like, okay, I need to be able to, if I want to build our relationship, I really want to build a like awesome foundation. I need to be able to dig deep and just truly be able to kill my ego in that moment and say, I'm willing to say that, I'm weak in this area. I need your help, and allow her to pour into me. And so that was the biggest barrier for me, was being able to break that fear of like being judged by her or being seen as weak in her eyes. But really, when we started and I told her that, right? That's part of vulnerability. When you are starting these conversations and they ask you like, well, tell me, why don't you want to? And then you say, okay, the way I said it, I'm afraid. I'm afraid that you're going to think that I'm weak because I'm telling you this, or because I'm shedding a tear, or because whatever, right?
Right.
And so I told her that, and literally the thing that came back was like, that's totally opposite of what I think of you. Like, I know that who you are, and when you show me that other side, like, it only validates everything else that you do. And I was like, I was just taken aback. I was like, what? Like, me opening up to you shows you how strong I am? And she's like, yeah, like it just validates everything that I already know of you. Like, it just solidifies everything. And I was like, oh, okay. And so that's helped me. Now, maybe not everybody has that, right? Maybe the wife's like, I don't want to, whatever. Or I don't know. The person that you're dealing with maybe doesn't want to show that, but I think that just goes back to ego. It's just like people need to kind of give that up and just say, hey, like, it's okay to be like seem weak in your head. And that's the thing too, guys. I'm getting into a lot of mindset stuff, and
that's what a lot of this is about. Let's be honest.
It is, and the mind is a tricky thing. The book that I'm reading right now, it's really talking about how the voice. You've noticed. I don't know if you ever trip out. Take a quick segment here, but if you ever listen to your inner voice, it's interesting how it has your voice. It sounds it's your tonality. Everything is you. But that voice isn't you.
No.
It's your subconscious. It's traits and habits that you've built over time. And the way that the book explains, it's like it can be based off of previous traumas, your upbringing, all these different things. But doesn't necessarily mean it has to be you. You just need to be aware of those thoughts and what it's saying to you, and then really challenge if it's not what you believe or not what you want to believe. And I've tied that into this because that voice was telling me, like, you're going to be weak. Your dad used to tell you, like, men don't cry. Men don't show weakness. We're always stoic. All this, and there's times for that. There is moments where you need to be stoic. You need to be the person that people are turning to, like, okay, like, what do we do? Great situation. If stuff wasn't going down, my wife knows I'm going to be calm, collected. We're going to do what we need to do, and I'll execute the plan. But guess what? We're not at war all the time. especially with your wife. You're not in a war. You're in a relationship. So taking the time to just say, hey, yeah, I can be vulnerable. I can take my armor off. I was out there fighting everybody, not physically, right? But mentally I'm out. I'm working. You're trying to protect yourself. You're doing all these things. You got your armor on. And that's why my mentors always told me, like, your home should be where you can come off, take your armor off, and your wife embraces you. You don't have to be the warrior all the time. There's moments, but vulnerability will help you solidify your relationship by being able to take that ego, that layer of armor off, and opening it up and creating a deeper relationship. So
that's a good thought. I'd never thought about it that way.
What about you, man? I mean, you've got to have barriers, right? So what barriers have you worked on, and how were you able to overcome those?
Okay, first, before this, I had this thought. How many living organisms can actually live on the surface of water?
Oh, dude.
Not
I failed biology.
Probably not many. I mean, I'm sure there's little insects that can land on water and deal with water, but I don't think there's very many living things, and that's why I say I don't think, just to be clear.
Yeah, we're not gurus, guys.
Yeah.
Chill out.
Just to be clear, I don't know, but from the knowledge that I have, there's not many things that can live on the surface of water. They either have to be above or below it.
Mm.
So why do you want to have a relationship try to stay on the surface? Unless you guys are in the clouds and still in the honeymoon phase, you need to get under the water and get deep into the ocean.
Mm.
Very weird thought, but it's very
true.
good.
It's true, man.
So, barriers for me is communication. I am terrible at communicating. I'm terrible about being honest with my communication. I'm working on it, and I've gotten multiple times better, a lot better with it. But communication, for the longest time, it's kind of the same thing. You don't want to open up. You don't want to be honest in your communication. You don't, you just for fear of being judged, or, why are you talking like this? Why are you acting like this? Why do you say this? But when you're honest and you're open and you're vulnerable about it, yeah, same thing. I mean, like you said, you take the armor off and you're able to communicate with your partner a lot better. You're able to talk openly. You're able to talk more freely. You're not stifling yourself. You're not, either one of you, you're not walking on eggshells. You're doing everything you can to be open and honest for that person, and to give them the space to do the same thing back with you. And I mean, most women that I've known, they get teary-eyed when they see a man cry.
Mm-hmm.
If they considered that weak, they wouldn't, in my eyes, they wouldn't get emotional about seeing a guy cry. And I've broken down a lot of these barriers for those, whether it is the ego, whether it's the armor, taking the armor off, because there's a lot of times that, yeah, even seeing certain people cry, it makes me cry. Like, I'll be honest, but I can feel what they're feeling. They're being so vulnerable and open that I can feel that also, which makes me want to be more vulnerable and open. But long, shortish, winded is communication. Breaking that barrier down was the biggest one for me.
So let me ask you this. Have you figured out why communication was such a hard barrier to break down? I mean, just in general, why that was such a critical point to work on? Have you been able to identify why it's been so hard for you?
No,
okay.
I haven't put a bunch of thought into that. There's something in my past that is telling me that communication is hard.
Right.
My family, I had good parents. They raised me to work hard and to be, whatever I needed to be. But I don't think our communication was all that great growing up. Both my parents worked, which I'm grateful for. My dad, for the longest time, was, cutting concrete and doing different things. And sometimes he wasn't home. Sometimes he was. But I don't think we communicated the way we should, in my opinion. And that probably set me up to not communicate very well. And I hope I'm not doing the same for my kids, but only time will tell. But in a quick thought, that would be what I would think.
Okay.
You
No,
know,
that's great, man. I was just wondering, and I could tell you, just by you being aware of what you want to fix and not putting any blame on your parents or anything like that. It doesn't sound like you're doing that anyways, but I'm just saying, just taking accountability of what you want to fix and what maybe you would have done differently if you were the head of your household.
yeah,
And now you're implementing that with your household.
I'm definitely trying. One thing I've learned through all of this is that at the end of the day, no matter how my parents raised me, no matter what situation I was put in, I mean, it does not matter. At the end of the day, it's my choice. It's my choice to continue down that road or change that path. As much as you know, and I know you agree with me because we've talked a lot about our past and
100%,
everything.
man.
But it's if you can't, you can change your future. Whether you have to be vulnerable to do it, whether you have to hold yourself accountable. It doesn't matter. You are in charge of your future. You're in charge of your present and your future. The past is what it is. But when you want to be open and honest and vulnerable, your future is probably going to be better.
100%. And yeah, you hit it right. We don't blame our parents for anything, right? I mean, we should only be grateful for what they provided, whether it be negative or positive, whatever. And we'll hit on this. I think this will be like a great, like either around Mother Day, Father Day type of pod where we can talk about our parents.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot there for me, but hopefully it'll be a good podcast where we can, really just show some gratitude, but also some things that maybe we would have done a little different, and that we are doing different. And just to end that, it's really just, I think you're doing a great job. So,
Hey, same to you.
Based if you're being aware of the situation and you're willing to work on it and change it for your family, something that you're working on, even though how hard and doesn't feel good sometimes to know that you're lacking in that space, but over time you'll become a master at it, because some people that ignore the situation will blame their kids. They're not blame, but their kids will come up with that same issue like you said, and then you'll be like, man, I should have changed that. I could have. It's like breaking that generational like hurt, that generational curses of whatever it might be. And we'll all have those in our lives where it's like, whether your father was an alcoholic or your mother, whatever, all these different things. There's a different, you choose your pains, your things that have kind of carried on through generational. We all can break those things. That we're not in this to blame others. And but I love that you were aware enough to say, hey, like, this is something that I want to work on. And maybe it was, well, let me ask you that before I get into it. Is it something that your wife kind of was like, hey, you need to work on this? Or was it something that you were able to just like pick up on and say, okay, hey, I need to work on this? Like,
100% it was her.
Okay.
I guess at a certain point I did have an ego about me and everything to do with myself, thinking that what I'm doing is okay. But no, it was 100% her. I mean, she's awesome about, women are more vulnerable anyway. She's awesome about, kind of calling me out of my shit and telling me what's going on. Sometimes we don't communicate the best about it, but we're still trying. We're still growing. We're still working together. I mean, like you said, this is a relationship. We're going to sail this ship until the end.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever the end might be, whether it's passing or whatever, we're going to sail the ship till the end. We're going to do everything we can to man it with the best people and the best attributes to make this the best relationship.
Right.
So, no, it was mainly her. I mean, once a lot of me personally, when someone says something to me, I might lash out. I've gotten a lot better at it, but a lot of times I can sit back and I can say, you're right. That's 100% what you're saying's right. Especially when it comes to like me and my youngest, we are so much alike that half the time the wife's like, you're acting just like she is. And then I might, spout off, but then I come back 5 minutes later. Yeah, you're right. I was definitely acting like her. So yeah, I mean,
Okay.
what about you?
As far as so for me, it was Tay. I think the way that I look at it is that it's if you have a good partner in your life, they're going to and it's also a perspective shift too, right? You have to know that the person that's giving you perspective or trying to help you or trying to help you grow isn't coming from a negative place. Maybe some are, but for them, I can only speak for my wife. She's not for me. And so you need to be able to drop your like ego of being like, oh, they're trying to be mean to me or they're trying to hurt me in some way. And that was the first step for me is when she told me, I need more out of this. I need you to be more, go deeper, in a sense of talking more about my emotions, better communication of what actually I'm feeling. Um, giving me that safe space when she was able to provide that to me, then I was willing and more open to be able to like dive deeper into these feelings. I have a hard time with feelings. I just call it what it is. We talked about this on the last episode. I don't do good with like being able to like show empathy and sympathy. I work on it because I know it's important. And I can be, don't get me wrong, I'm not like a freaking jerk. Like if somebody's getting like, I can do it for the most part on big issues, but when it comes to little things on a day to day, I have a hard time with that type of stuff. So I've really worked on being able to provide that because that's something that my wife needs to know. If I had a bad day, she's like, "How was your day?" "Oh, it was all right." Like sometimes I would feel that if I was like, "Oh man, I had a crappy day. Like today was hard," you know, ex Bob Billy Bob like said this to me, and I was irritated. And then I'm like, "Well, is it really adding value to the relationship? Am I really like, is there really getting anything out of it? Like, does she really want to listen to me like complain about this?" But to her, it's not complaining. It's I'm telling her what I felt that day, how it was, not this surface level. That's all right. It was cool. And I still do that sometimes. Don't get me wrong. I'm not complaining about or talking about like all the time. But for me, it was that. She was just, I looked at it from her. She was trying to get the most out of me. And that's what a good partner does. They're trying to help you grow, they're trying to help you elevate yourself. They're trying to push it to the next level. That's what keeps the relationship growing, nourished, and moving forward. Sometimes we become so stagnant in our relationships. I know because I've been there. Um, and that's only because of what we're doing and what we're not doing. If you're not wanting to build that deeper connection and be authentic with your wife or your friends or whatever, like, yeah, that relationship will fizzle. Like, it's not gonna, you can't maintain it. Like, you can only go for so long, and you only talk about, you know, I don't know, a show for so many, you watch it so many times. How many, your relationship
Right.
for forever till you pass away, right? Till you move on. Well, guess what? That could be 50, 60, 70 years down the road. I don't think your wife wants to hear about your football game every single weekend, and that's the base of your relationship. I don't think you guys just want to talk about a show. And don't get me wrong; those things are okay, I guess, but they're not going to build and move you forward. Now, if your partner's like, "Hey, like, I want to know this about you. I want you to show me this. I want," and vice versa. I think I'm putting it a lot on her, but yeah, sometimes you need to be vulnerable enough to say, "Hey, I need this from you." You know what I mean? And so yeah, for me, it was just that. It was she that's how our relationship dynamic works. She knows that she just needs to tell me what she needs, and this like roundabout type of stuff where you're just like, you should already know. You should pick up on the cues. I'm like, baby, I think of me of like this dumbest person that you've ever dated. Like, just tell me straight up what you need, and I promise I will work on it. And then as we go through things, I will try to pick those things up and be better about picking up cues. But in the very beginning, and even sometimes, I'm just like, just tell me what you need. Tell me what you want me to try to, what you need from me, and then I'll work on it. And so,
This is not it's not even gonna sound bad, but you know we I struggle with that too, like picking up on the cues and stuff. And at least for my wife, she's like, I don't want to nag you about this or that. And to me, she's never nagged me because she asked me to do something, and it's not like every day she's like, nagging. Did you do this? Did you do this? It was like, hey, why didn't you do this? I wish you would have done this. Or, hey, can you do this? You know, for her, when it's hard for her to sometimes be that vulnerable, which I can understand. You know, with that's the way she is. But when she's vulnerable, she's extremely vulnerable. And we grow because even though I might be hurt in that moment because what she's saying might hurt me, but it wasn't meant to, it was just her being honest. Again, my choice. I can grow with it. I can learn from it. I can listen to her. Yeah, I have the right to be pissed in that moment. I have the right to, whatever. But it's what I do after. Am I going to grow? Am I going to learn? Or am I going to continue the same patterns? I mean, I'm still learning. I'm still growing. I'm still changing. And it's gotta give somewhere, but you gotta be vulnerable. That's the give, in my opinion. You both have to be vulnerable and give in and help each other grow.
Right. I love that, dude. What's a good like communication tip? Like since you're working on that, like is there something that you've kind of worked on that like the viewers can look at and say like, hey, like I did this a little bit different. This is how I started kind of, was it a small transition? You're just trying to communicate little things that maybe to you might not, because I know this, I've always heard like men think we're over communicating. If you think you're communicating, you're under communicating. So I just ask you that, like, are you working on like, do you just like say little things like, hey babe, I'm going to go take out the garbage, or hey, or I don't know, like what methods or what have you used to better communicate, I guess?
In person more than anything, honestly. Like, because my wife and I have we talk a lot throughout the day. We have the availability and the chances to. And when we don't, it's not a big deal, but we talk a lot during the day. But being able to talk more in person, be honest in person, because you get the emotions behind it, you get the more context, in my opinion, when you're in person. I can tell you 100 things over text, but that emotion isn't behind it.
Mm.
So the biggest thing was like an in-person, and honestly for us, we enjoyed going for drives or on long road trips, and those were and have always been some of our best talks. Which is good and bad because you're stuck in a vehicle with them, but a lot of the times you have the time to really talk the stuff out. So, I mean, for the most part, it's just quit being a bitch, honestly. Like, I need to tell myself this more often, but you just got to do it. You got to quit worrying, because at the end of the day, my opinion, if that woman you are trying to have a relationship with does not want you to be open, honest, and vulnerable, she's not the woman for you. She still needs to grow up.
Right.
Or vice versa. If that woman goes to that man and she's open and honest and he's just a complete dick about everything, right. Same thing. He's not ready. He needs to grow up, and that's the choices they have.
Love it.
At least that's the way I see it, because you're playing a game. I mean, it's life.
Mm-hmm.
We've all played the game of life. At least I hope we've all played the game of life. The board game. It's you're doing that same thing that whoever invented that.
I'll have to play it because I've never played it.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a lot like life.
I'm a ghetto kid, bro. Like, we didn't play board games.
It's a lot like
but we
life.
got to play it. If you got it,
no.
Game night, dude. Let's buy it and let's do it.
We'll have to buy it and do it. Because, yeah, it's a lot like life is. You have your choice of high school, college, get married, kids, jobs. You might lose a job. What do you do now? I mean, it's
interesting.
It's a lot to do. I mean, it's got fun things. You can win money, do this. You can choose where you retire, all this stuff. And if you really think about it, that's life. You have your choices. Make your choices.
Love it.
And if you're open and honest and vulnerable, in my opinion, those choices went from 10 to 100.
Okay. I'll have to check it out, man.
We will definitely have to buy it.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I did not know you hadn't played
I've
life.
never played it, dude. So we'll have to put that on the list of families to get together, and we'll play life. So
there's like the real game of life too. There's another one that's a little bit different.
Really?
Yeah, I was like a lesbian shaman and I died. Dude, it was.
Do they have the Mexican version?
Probably. I'm sure you could shoot. That one was the other one was. It was way different. It was interesting. It was fun, but it was more. I mean, you could be a drug dealer. I mean, you could be
dude,
all sorts
we
of
gotta
weird
get that
stuff.
one.
Like
We're doing
it
it.
was pretty cool.
We're getting the real life one,
But-
the real AF one.
Yeah, right. But the funny thing about the other one, half of us didn't survive.
Oh wow. Now I'm interested. Now I'm looking to
I'll
buy it.
have to find
We're
out
gonna
what
buy
it is.
So just quickly, man, before we move on, I know we kind of got off into a segment, but I think you hit on. So you're talking about the car rides. I think we've talked about this. That some of the best conversations have happened when car rides or when you're on a walk or whatever. Even our families,
Yep.
we do get together in the summer and we do walks, and I feel like I've had some of the best conversations with you. I've had some good conversations with your wife and my wife, and we've had great conversations. But one thing that Taylor told me when we were kind of going through this, trying to learn how to communicate to each other, how to, be more vulnerable on my side and open up more. I don't, like I said, I don't really like conflict. I don't, unless it's something major. Like I really don't. I say I'll brush it off, but I know I carry a lot of it with me. So I'm learning to be like, hey, like that bothered me, babe. Like I didn't like that. And she told me something that really changed the way that I approached it. She's like, it's okay for me to be upset at you. It's okay for me to want, like, if I throw a tantrum and I'm mad at you, like, that's okay. Just give me a moment. Let me run through my emotions and we'll, like you said, we'll figure it out. So we've had those conversations when, we're driving to Vegas or Denver for, 6 hours, 8, 9 hours, and the conversation gets weird, and there's tears and there's these loud, let's just say, loud discussions. But in all seriousness, no, man, like, when she told me that, I was like, okay, like, it's okay. And she's been a person of her word. Like, I can say what I feel in the moment, how I'm feeling, be vulnerable with what I actually feel. And she'll tell me, and she'll, we'll have some loud discussions in the car, which oddly enough, that's usually when we have like most of our discussions, our loud discussions, which goes back to your point. Sometimes it's just stuck in a car, so you have nothing to do but either blast music or talk to each other. And so, yeah, she's given me that window to say, hey, just give me a moment to feel my emotions. It might be rough for the few couple, minutes or whatever, but once we talk it through, we'll get through it. And that's really helped me to be able to be more vulnerable with her, because I know that I can give her that grace to have those emotions, and then we'll come back and deal with the situation. And knowing that I was able to be vulnerable with her and nothing, like I wasn't seen as weak. I didn't wasn't afraid of her in any sense of like, oh, she's going to, be hurt because I was vulnerable with her. I'm obviously not telling her like super negative stuff, but if she talked to me a certain way and I was like, hey, I didn't really like that tonality. I didn't like the way that came out. Okay. So like, cool. There's some defensiveness, like a human being would come back, right? She told me like, hey, I don't like the way you said that. I'm like, well, how else did you want me to say it? Well, those are just typical conversations. And then we work through it. And I'm like, okay, take a step back. How can I have said it better so that, you could have been more receptive to it? Boom. We work through it. That's what a relationship communicates. Vulnerability, held accountability to myself to say I was wrong. Okay. Because because I don't see it the way she's seen it, doesn't mean it's not true. Doesn't mean that it's now I'm invalidating her feelings if I'm like, you're wrong.
I hear those words way too often. But it's something to work on, where it's not so much what you say, or it's how you say it, or it's how you look. And
oh, dude, the look thing kills me.
she
tells me, she's like, what's wrong with your face? I'm
yeah.
like, I don't know. I thought I was. Maybe that's why a lot of people don't want to talk to me sometimes. I'm walking around like talking, how are you? And they're like, what's wrong with this guy? He's like,
you said I looked good. No, that's things that I've been working on them. I'm a very introvert person. I don't generally talk to a lot of people. I don't generally do, big crowds.
Right.
At least that's the mindset I'm currently in, because that I want to change. And people, this is all about change. Just remember this.
Yep.
Growth and change. That's something I want to change, because I know I'm going to be involved in large crowds. at almost any given point in my life, I'm going to have some sort of large crowd. So being able to be vulnerable with myself to, hey, quit being you and just be you, but quit being the negative you. Quit being the guy that's scared to stand in the corner. Go talk to somebody. Like, most of the time you go to any sort of party or any sort of event or something, you're all there for the same reason.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why I get so nervous to talk to people. I just need to be vulnerable and quit being a little bitch. But
You just got that's that voice in your heads, man. It keeps, it tries to take over, and it almost freezes you in the moment. So,
but if I wasn't vulnerable enough to listen to my wife say this stuff, I can't grow. So,
no, I love that, man. I think, that's a great kind of way, and I think we've given some good real life examples of what going through, so hopefully people can pull some nuggets. But I guess to wrap this up in a nice little pretty bow, I think for the most part it's just being honest with yourself and saying, hey, okay, I need to be better at this. And the only way to, at least in the relationship sense, the only way to get better is to be able to be vulnerable with the person that's sitting next to you and say, hey, we want to get better. How can our relationship get better? And let them give you some feedback of what they need. And hopefully that flows into your day-to-day life, because the more that you can be open and honest with somebody and give that vulnerability to somebody else, they'll reciprocate that. I'm not just going to be vulnerable with you and you're going to be like a stoic and be like, well, dude, I can't really talk to you. So it's gotta be a two-way street to be able to grow the relationship, friendship, or whatever it might be. So
it's like the saying, iron sharpens iron. If you're gonna be vulnerable with somebody, their vulnerability is gonna come out too. It might not be right that second, but the more you guys communicate with each other and are vulnerable, that iron's just gonna get sharper and sharper and sharper, and your relationship, in my opinion, is gonna grow.
I love it. So wrapping it up, what's one actionable item somebody can do this week, man? And talk to the viewers on this one directly, because give them one and I'll give them one. What's something they can do actionable this week to just, work on their vulnerability? What's one thing they can do?
Guys, pick something this week. Try to be vulnerable with somebody. Wife, friend, spouse, whoever. Just be vulnerable. If it's something that maybe something's been bothering you, just say, hey, I need to talk to you for a minute. I'm going to be vulnerable with you. This has been bothering me. Or maybe you're struggling. Maybe you're having a hard time. Go to your partner, your spouse, and say, hey, I need to be vulnerable. Like, I'm struggling. Like, mentally, I am struggling. I might need some help.
Love it. Thanks, man. For me, yeah, just face that fear of being vulnerable. Be like Dustin said, my thing is, if somebody, you feel a certain emotion, tell that person that emotion, especially if they're your partner. If they did something that maybe you weren't fully aligned with, that hurts you in some way, you got some emotion out of it, just say, hey, I felt this way. I just want to let you know that. Don't expect anything back. Just be okay with you being vulnerable and opening yourself up, and just let the conversation flow from there. And I'm sure you guys will have a great conversation after that. So
last thing though, sometimes if you are too emotional, if you are still like, if it pissed you off to that point, maybe take 10 minutes, calm down, and approach it with a better manner. This is something I'm still working on. I know you still are too.
100%.
Sometimes you just got to take that step back. So just add a little bit more to that today. So you guys, thank you very much. We appreciate it. If you got any real feedback out of this, we'd love to hear it. Love you to like, share, comment. Got any questions, guys? Just let us know. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, guys. See you on the next episode.